Welcome to Prelude to Ulysses. This is Alex Reed's Ancient Evenings. We are on the Book of the Gods, Part 3. Last time, how we left off was Isis had poisoned Ra and tricked him into giving her his secret name, something she needed, apparently, because the Ka of her ex-husband and brother, Osiris, reached her in a dream and said, you need it. You need to get the secret name of Ra. And she did it. So, Part 3. Isis rose, and the foam of the old man drained from her legs. She said, spew, poison, spew. Out of me, out of Ra. Ra lives and the poison dies. Then she put on the great golden robe Ra had left on the floor. The robe was filthy, but sediments and water washed from it as if by rain, and Isis stood in glory. The gods applauded. They were terrified. Some remembered old calumnies, Calumnies. Calumnies means slanderous statements, whether true or false. Some remembered old calumnies upon Isis. Still, the prettiest of them was already trying to capture her eye. But a stranger came forward from the back of their ranks, holding a robe to cover Ra. The stranger's hair was white, yet his face was young and more beautiful than any other. It was the Ka of Osiris. He stood beside Isis and held her hand. At that instant, his body became lost to hers. His flesh was so transparent that Osiris disappeared into her. To Ra, she said, in the voice of Osiris, to Ra, she said in the voice of Osiris, Old God, when there is need for gentle days, you may bring sugar to the fruit trees and encouragement to the crops of the fields. But when you enter the duad by night, you will wear my winding sheet. Now will my son Horus be the golden eye of the day and the silver eye of the moon. In the duad will I rule over the dead, and through my wife Isis will I rule over the crops of the Nile. Go forth to perform your duties. As he separated from Isis, Osiris became visible again, holding his body, but the width of a finger apart from her body. For whenever they touched, his presence flowed forth into her again. He ordered the gods to return to their places and dream of no new power. The master of the future was here, and Osiris opened his loincloth to reveal that if his phallus had been devoured by Abtu, and the fish in turn swallowed by Ra, now he, Osiris, had become devourer of he who devoured him. In consequence, his phallus had 3 limbs. One for Ptah, Ptah, the master builder, stood forth like a post and glowed hot as metal in the forge. Another was massive, motionless, as dark as Seker, S-E-K-E-R, knobbed like a root from the depths of the earth. Last, all but transparent, was the phallus of Osiris himself, and it arched like a rainbow after his wanderings through the air, the surf, and the mist. A luminous phallus for the lord of the mind, Osiris, god of the resurrection. At this sight, Ra vomited. Yet nothing came out of his belly. The once indigestible phallus was certainly gone, and he could only slink away. When Isis and Osiris were alone, however, their conversation was less majestic. It is part, said Osiris, of the difficulties of our position, that we cannot even touch each other, or I will disappear again. So we won't touch. For then, we cannot talk, and there is much to tell you. I know more about the duad than you would care to hear. He gave a tender smile, and added in his lightest, most agreeable voice, As a young prince, I would never listen to any wretch whose tale would bore me. Now I spend my years taking account of the endless justifications of the dead. Their piety is insatiable. Was it your fault or the fault of your wife? I ask some absolute wretch, and his answer is invariably is that it would take our Lord Osiris to know. Yes, you must be weary, answered Isis in a small voice. The coolness of his greeting was certainly a distance away from their last embrace off the coast of Byblos. I can only say, said Osiris, that I have had to wander through varieties of existence I would not describe. He yawned. A look of revulsion came over her face. His breath, while not corrupt, had the smell of the void. She felt her powers disappearing into this emptiness. Smiling wisely, he drew farther away and gave a sad smile. Yes, we must talk, he said. Our position is most vulnerable. We must talk quickly. Therefore I will pass over the abominable pleasures you took with Ra, even if that cost my life. I will pass over your day with Nephthys. Osiris nodded. It does not matter what we have done. I cannot reign by your side until you put together what has been laid asunder 14 times. The search should not be difficult, said Isis. I have more power than ever before. No, said Osiris, there is always one more power to need. Again he smiled sadly. All of me must be found and properly embalmed in 14 years. What if it takes longer? You will inherit the woes of Set. Choose between lightning and thunder. So Isis went back to the Nile, and Osiris, in full possession of the voids of the dead, ruled in her place. Heaven was a muted region, and entertainments were few. Affairs proceeded beneath a quiet sky. Ra merely nodded his head to old admirers as he took each daily ride. And Isis, on any convocation of the gods, would sit at a distance from Osiris. Her beauty began to be lost. To find each piece of the body of Osiris proved difficult. In the first year she found nothing, nor in the second, nor third. In 3 years, nothing. With Anubis she hunted through the far-off regions, but the dogs she employed were of no use. Having the wisdom of a jackal, Anubis would certainly teach his hounds to search for the faintest traces of a scent. But there was no odor to the dead man. Even his loincloth offered no more than a hint of the thighs of Isis, sufficient for the dogs to come near to attacking her. So they found nothing. Perhaps it was in the balance of Mot not to be able to locate more than one piece each year. Since Set had already strewn 3 into Buto before the graves of her camp, why assume, asked Isis, that they would come upon the 4th until the 4th year had begun? Anubis asked what she had done. With the first 3 pieces, and when she replied that she laid them in a bed of natron. That book was not in the dictionary. Natron. Isis began to brood upon her own remark. While the 11 unfound pieces could have decomposed long ago, still she must proceed as if they existed. Why not expect, therefore, that each fragment had been wise enough to float towards a marsh where salt would abound? Oh, natron is a salty thing, isn't it? I think natron is a moisture-licking salt bath. So in each region, she could limit their search to the pools, bends, and swamps of natron. N.A. Yeah, even if they looked for damp flats full of embalmer's salt, the dogs were still without a scent. Anubis mixed herbs that might suggest the presence of Osiris, but they did not guide the dogs. He came at last to propose that the child Horus, conceived from a dead god, might have something of his father's odor. That is to say, his lack of it. I do not know if hounds can bear such emptiness, was Isis's reply. Nonetheless, she took her skirt and gave it to Horus for play. He chewed on it, rolled his body in the wrappings, and returned a torn garment. Having put it on, Isis then anointed herself with mandrake and fortified it with myrrh so that the mandrake would grow aromatic while she slept and travel out to the lost parts of Osiris. At dawn, Anubis passed the cloth to the dogs. The hounds went through convulsions which left them so acute in the nose that each year of the remaining years, a part of Osiris's body was found quickly. Interesting. A part of Osiris's body was found quickly, but then not all of the credit needed to be given to the dogs. The head of Osiris, the first piece found, still had the thumb of Set in its mouth. And Isis was able to use that thumb to guide her boat. By the rudder of Set, therefore, or the nose of the dogs, it never took more than a week, and the remainder of the year could be devoted to building a tomb. Of course, it was not easy to find a priest for such a task. Many were afraid of Set, but when she encountered a promising fellow, Isis would tell him, "We will take this divine part and add it to a body of wax." You are the only one to know that here rests only a 14th part of Osiris. Yet the part will be as the whole, and you will be the high priest in this nome of Egypt. She would then seal the pact with a kiss. Isis always detested that small embrace. Divinity passed out of her lips and into the priest's mouth, even as his will was surrendered to her. Thereafter he obeyed all instructions. Yet she lamented that the lips of 14 such men, mortal and monotonous, must she know upon her mouth before the 14 tombs could be built. A trace of these priests, born of 14 more or less ordinary women, would yet add to their depredations to her features. Her only consolation was that each priest had been deceived, for the part of Osiris that she had given them was also made of wax. The piece of the true body were locked up in a chest of natron, and on such a throne she sat while sailing up the Nile or drifting down. She's giving them fake body parts so they build tombs? Because she can't trust them, even though she's definitely can. On the first day of the 14th year, Isis, Anubis, and the hounds found the last soaking stump of Osiris in the steaming salts of Yeb, and the sun went through an eclipse. Isis trembled from a sudden fear of all the worlds to come. The leg stood up in her grasp, as if its will were to walk. Then it fell from her hand. And in the instant of its fall, she had a vision of wars to ensue between Horus and Set. Horror was still upon her house. Isis, however, walked through the salts to her papyrus bark, and laid in the leg with the other pieces. She wrapped the body, and in the evening she called for her sister Nephthys and Mot and Thoth. Together with Horus, they slaughtered a bull to mark the end of the curse of Set. Now Horus, who was 14, and heavy in the chest and thin in his legs, opened the eyes and mouth of Osiris, which was the first time the ceremony of the opening of the mouth was ever performed. And Horus said, "Let the Ka of Osiris come forth from the eyes and mouth of his new abode," and the Ka of Osiris joined them. And his odor had the fragrance of the finest gardens of Egypt. And they ate well that night. In the morning, they departed towards heaven, for Osiris was full of concern at the storm-racked sky. There had been lightning and thunder towards dawn. "We were just in time," he said. All right. Next one's a huge one. Well, I mean, for my standards. That's a good one. The reassembling of Osiris. They're getting to it. I just wonder what I'd like to read. I guess the Book of the Dead or something. I don't know. I am hoping that this is as accurate to Egyptian mythology as humanly possible. But again, this was written in like 1984 or something. 83. Oh wait, it says 1961 somewhere? Oh. Oh, okay. The quote from W.B. Yeats is 61. I mean, it's a fun story. I love it. Super weird. I'd like to see a modern interpretation of these concepts. Matthew Barney's film, The River of Fundament, is the reason why I'm here reading this book. Also because it's about Egyptians, which is about the Bible, which is blah, 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 blah. Because the Bible's interesting, and they keep mentioning other gods at this point, and how, well, I just read the Ten Commandments part. I just didn't understand. I guess these are the other gods. It's the Egyptian gods. That God is so, that this angry, jealous God is so mad about. I don't know what to say about it. I don't know what to say about it. I like it. This is a fun book to read.